Thank you for listening to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast, available on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Stitcher. Also, please follow Matt's Movie Reviews on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Reddit, Instagram, and MeWe. And of course, be sure to visit mattsmoviereviews.net for the latest reviews, top 10 lists, and more. Now, on to the show.
Hundreds of people today phoned the ZBC saying they sighted an unidentified flying object.
It was a bright, radiant light. I've never seen anything like it in my life.
It was the absence of noise I didn't like.
People from all over Zimbabwe were phoning the BBC to say, we've seen something weird.
There were three of us that saw it. Myself, the co-pilot, and the pilot in the other aircraft.
No wings, no nothing. Shiny oval thing.
Ariel School, 19th September 94. Could you tell me what you saw on Friday?
The silver thing in amongst this clump of trees.
We saw this black figure running.
His face was like this and his eyes were down here.
I just thought it was some kind of alien from a different planet.
When you looked at those children, they were absolutely credible. And whereabouts was it?
In the trees over there.
There was a big group of kids pointing and making a noise and shouting and screaming.
The panic spread. Am I safe or am I not safe?
And he's a Harvard psychiatrist.
Meet Dr. John Mack, a believer in aliens from outer space.
We came away convinced that an extraordinary event occurred here.
I think they want people to know that we're actually making harm on this world.
How did that get communicated to you?
It came through my head.
Somehow there was a message about pollution from the way he was staring?
Yes.
I was just a hard-ass journalist. I could handle war zones, but I could not handle this UFO thing.
I mean, I never felt this could derail my career.
The dean wanted to know, what is he doing?
Angels, yes. Extraterrestrials, no.
John is lost at this time.
This journey is literally to pick up the pieces and put them back together.
Oh my gosh.
I was right on the log when it actually happened.
We are the ones who drew those funny pictures.
Something that I'll never ever forget.
I've drawn this again.
But I usually kept it quiet.
People think you're crazy.
My husband doesn't even know about it.
You feel so alone in society.
Why is it that we tend to want to shrink this powerful phenomenon to our notions of reality rather than being able to stretch ourselves to expand what we know and to admit that we don't know?
Would you like to see him again?
Yes.
And if you saw him again, what would you do?
I'll ask him some questions.
What would you like to ask him?
I'll ask him what is he doing on Earth and what does he want with us.
Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I am your host, Matthew Pejkovic, and this is episode number 490. Releasing December 25 on digital is Ariel Phenomenon, a documentary that delves into the 1994 mass UFO sighting event at the Ariel School in Zimbabwe, in which over 60 school children witnessed an extraterrestrial event. The film also explores the efforts of Harvard professor of psychiatry John Mack and BBC war journalist Tim Leech in keeping this story alive. A documentary that explores the real-world human implications of experiencing an out-of-this-world event. Ariel Phenomenon also marks the feature film debut of UFO researcher Randall Nickerson, who now directs the film and produces and does a whole bunch of other stuff as well, Randall. I mean, this is really a film that's a passion project for you, and you have our fingers in a lot of pies on this one, don't you?
Yeah, that's true. Thanks for having me on, Matt, by the way.
Absolutely. I mean, it's such a pleasure to have you on. And, you know, just reading up about Ariel Phenomenon and your relation to the film. I mean, I've read articles as far back as, say, 2009 talking about how you were trying to get this film off the ground. And this is a documentary that in many ways is self-financed and self-distributed. And now that it's some critics have seen it, early reviews have been very strong. It's to be released very soon. How does it feel that now, after all these years, the film will finally come out? How does it feel on your end as a filmmaker and someone who has invested such a such a personal and financial cost into making this film? How does it feel now that people will be watching it finally?
It feels very, very good. I started in 2007, and you have all these different ideas of when you're going to get done, and the financing was a real big issue. To be able to go to Africa, I spent a year and 3 months there, 3 different trips, and to get the proper people to work on the film also. But I feel great that it's done. You know what I mean? That I achieved the goal I wanted to do, which was to tell this story. But yeah, it feels good. And what feels even the most rewarding has been happening in the last 3 months, and it's been the letters I've been getting from people, and it's just one sentence. It said that just really touches my heart, and that says, thank you for validating my experience. And to me, there's nothing. I mean, I would have done it all for that, because I know how that is. When you've been living with something your entire life, and finally someone tells that story in the way it should be told, in a way, and with real, honest, legitimate people. There's no gift you can give bigger to anybody. And it's not me that just gave that. It was our crew. It was all the witnesses who had the courage to come forward. So that, like, the biggest gift to me is and I hope the kids that were interviewed, the witnesses, really hear that's kind of the impact I've been getting over and over. Because a lot of people that has had this happen to them isolate, and don't talk about it. They're afraid of getting ridiculed or laughed at, and they just keep it inside.
For me, this documentary is interesting in that it is a film about this UFO incident that happened back in 1994, but it's also a film, I think, it's a story about tenacity in the face of opposition. It's a story about these group of people who all experienced something and just really never wavering, no matter what type of opposition was thrown against them, especially when it comes to someone, say, like John Mack or Tim Leech. Their careers, in many ways, were really put under the fire because they refused to give in to any type of groupthink, and they refused to give in they refused to abandon these kids who put their story out there bravely. That story of tenacity, is that something that really spoke to you as well in regards to the stories of John Mack and Tim Leech in regards to the Ariel school incident?
It did, and it was more than just John. I mean, it was more than John Mack and Tim Leech and the kids. It was other researchers that were involved in it, other parents that held that for years and years, decades, really. That same kind of tenacity of the story can't go unheard. It's too big, too important. And it's just, no one has ever come forward to say it was something else, ever. And it's just, it's amazing. And I think it was because of the exposure to interviewing those kids. You knew they were telling the truth. There was just no question about that. And why would they do that? Why would they? If they wanted to come forward with a story, they'd have all everything would be, this was this way, this was this way, but they were in awe, in shock, didn't have a lot of answers. And that's what happens.
It's a very human story, isn't it? I mean, the UFO event is the trigger that brought all these people together, but it's about the ramifications that happen to these people, whether it be towards their spiritual lives, their personal lives, family lives, their own kind of like dealing with what is reality as they knew it, as to what it was post this event. And one of the people that you focus on in the film is Emily Trim. She is she was in Zimbabwe at the school. She's originally from Canada. She witnessed the event along with so many others. But for her, this was still very much a process in regards to she didn't really have anyone to talk to about this, and a lot of people didn't, because a lot of the adults in their lives, would be parents or teachers, or some people kind of dismissed their story. An interesting thing about Emily as well is, isn't it true that she contacted you in a sort of kind of like and I wouldn't say aggressive, but in very much a, hey, this is our story. Who are you to be the one to tell it kind of vein? Is it a kind of a true thing that happened there?
That's exactly true. I still have that email, and yeah, it's just like, wow, I'm stepping into something here that people have a lot of feelings about, and there's, I understand, because I don't think she understood or knew how I was going to present the story. I'm sure she felt like, hey, don't mess with us. Don't mess with us kids, because we're not going to be made fun of or anything like that. I got to shout out to Emily, because she really took a real big risk and gave a lot to be part of this film. And very few people do that,
The interesting thing about Emily is that I myself am a Christian. I know there are a lot of Christians out there who are looking at the whole kind of like UFO phenomenon, especially the a lot of things that have been revealed over the last couple of years. And they I don't know, I'm not go as far to say that they're questioning their faith in any way. I'm not saying that, but it's a real kind of interesting kind of juxtaposition about how this thing over here fits with this other thing that we've come accustomed to as a human species over the last 2,000 years or so, since Christianity has been around, and that the idea of the conflicting worldviews is a really kind of interesting element in this movie, not only towards Emily's story, but I think a lot of people as well. When people face an event like they did with this kind of like UFO incident, it really kind of, the ramifications afterwards is really kind of searing, I think.
I think that's true. Religion was a focus because there were so many. It was a religious school. The Ariel school is a Christian school, and I have no beef or anything around religion. I believe in God myself, but it doesn't mean that these things are evil, or we don't know what these things are, but we do. I believe. Know that they come from somewhere else, and it's a pretty big universe. So yeah, there is a lot of, and a lot of the kids had come to the realization that, it doesn't matter, that there's other life in the universe. It's in the Bible. God said, there, I don't know, you can get into the text, and why would he not spread it out all over the place? And we're just starting to meet some of those other creatures from other places. So and I know.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I know everybody talks about, well, how would they get there? Well, we do this in the military, and we go to a faraway place. Granted, it's not interplanetary at this point, but we set up a forward operating base of, and then we resupply that, over and over. So they only had to travel once. You know what I mean? And that may have been a long time ago. I don't know, but the whole idea of people talking about how could they even possibly get here? Well, we don't even know, because we haven't evolved that far. What's possible, but also, another species would likely, if they were interested in ours, would likely set up some kind of forward operating base or whatever, so they don't have to travel back and forth, if that's an issue at all.
So Emily reaches out to you, but there are so many other witnesses as well. How do you go about finding the witnesses? Because after that incident, they kind of like, a lot of the kids kind of like become adults, and they've established their own lives that are kind of spread out around the world. How do you go about finding these kids now that they're adults? Does Emily help with that? Is there kind of like, do other people reach out to you? I'm really curious in regards to that.
Well, I got a lot of the names when I first went to the school in 2008, March, and I got a lot of names from the school. I had great help from Robin Jerd and Nikki Carter. And we started reaching out and searching those people on Facebook. And Facebook just sort of came out at that time in 2006, 2007. So I was using it, and even MySpace was still around back then, and just trying to locate them online so I could figure out where they were, because they were very mobile, being in their 20s, or early 30s. They were moving all over the world. So it was very hard to track them and set up a time. But I did, Africa. I had to stay in Africa for quite a long time to get the people there, because I didn't know if they were going to leave at any time. They may have moved out to England or Australia. So, and then I did all of Europe, finding all the ones in Europe and in the United States. And then it just, there was several witnesses in Australia that I just couldn't afford to get to. But yeah, that was a journey in itself, was locating these people. It took an awful long time. And then, once you locate them, then the conversations that I had on the phone with people were was out there in the world. But and people would tell me about it over the phone, and then I'd say, hey, would you like to do an interview? And then that would be a yes or a no. And so yeah, there were a lot of witnesses, a lot that I didn't either get to or did not want to put their faces on a film.
It's interesting. Go ahead.
Not that they didn't believe or weren't witness to something that happened. It's just they were afraid of what it would do to their lives and their friendships.
And that part's really interesting to me, because over the years that you've made this film, and when you first kind of conceived it 2007, and all that time you've been making it, and all of the interviews that you've done, an interesting thing has been happening within pop culture, within media, within just the world at large, in that the acceptance of belief for these incidents has gradually grown and grown and grown, to the point where now you have the United States government admitting to tracking these things, and there's Senate hearings and all these other things going on, and it's quite interesting to see. So while you're making this movie, where a lot of these witnesses have been ostracized and ridiculed and questioned, the things that was once considered taboo in regards to UFO sightings and UFO belief has become much more mainstream now. It's quite an interesting parallel that's going on there.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I didn't expect that to happen. Probably most people didn't, but it did. So yeah, it's a rather exciting time. And, I think of all those people who came forward from the beginning, way back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, who spoke out publicly all the way through the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And a lot of those people are no longer alive. That makes me a little sad that they're not seeing this day because of the flack they took and how it changed their lives. I mean, the Ariel kids are pretty lucky in a way, that the timing for this event is being accepted. But yeah, it's exciting, and I never thought I would see what is happen. But I think it's good for all of us. I think the most important thing, regardless of what these things are, is let's find out the truth. What is it? Because I want to know. I want to know what their intentions are. There's a million questions I would love to have answered, because, they're obviously, seemingly, a very technological species from God only knows where. And they can have a quite an impact on our civilization without us even knowing it. So that's, part of my concern. Not that I just don't even refer to good, evil. It's not even about that. We're dealing with another species, and it doesn't appear to be like they're out to, take over the planet or any of those sci-fi things. That's not what's going on. It doesn't appear to be.
The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by TeePublic. TeePublic is the world's largest marketplace for independent creators to sell their work on the highest quality merchandise. With over 1.2 million designs, TeePublic is sure to have something you'll love. The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by Amazon. The world's leading online store, Amazon is your first stop to buy a wide range of products at competitive prices with fast delivery times. Amazon is also a world-class entertainment hub that includes Prime Video, Audible, Twitch, Amazon Music, and more. Sign up with Amazon today and experience the best in online shopping and entertainment. Please support Matt's Movie Reviews on Patreon. Get access to exclusive content, request movie reviews and top 10 lists, and help support my work. Please click on the Patreon link in the description below. I want to talk about the treasure trove of archival footage that's in this documentary. It's so fantastic that you can get your hands on the live interviews that the children did, or the different kind of like news footage, just the town hall meetings as well, just all incredible stuff. Having spoken to independent filmmakers before, especially documentarians, usually they tell me stories about how difficult it can be, not so much in locating the footage, but getting the rights to the footage, especially when you're dealing with budgets that may need to be stretched quite a bit to accommodate for that. Was that something that you had to go through as well in regards to obtaining rights to a lot of this footage to use in your documentary? And if so, what have you learned over the years about copyrights and et cetera when it comes to archival footage? Because for a lot of filmmakers I talk to, it's definitely been a learning curve in the process of putting these films together.
Oh, yes, for sure. Like I figured I could get this film out for about $200,000, but that was right in the beginning. I'm like, no, because my uncle had left me $200,000 to get this film done before he died. Mm-hmm. Which was amazing. Byron Canny really, he believed that I was going to get this done, and I did. But still, starting at 200,000, then you get to a point, it's like, oh my gosh, I've got to hire an attorney. I've got, it just becomes bigger. And then when you get into rights, people own this footage, and that was it was a very expensive part of this film, was paying for the rights to use it. All these different interviews, and there's another 60 interviews that are not even in the movie that are profound. And I would love to at some point to get those out. So it's just more of the slam dunk, so to speak, of that this really happened. But yeah, it's been an education, a learning curve, a steep one sometimes. Just even dealing with attorneys and dealing with rights holders, and I'm pretty good at it now, but it's been tough. But it is a financial burden that, especially when you get exclusive footage that nobody else has, the price on that stuff goes up. It's not like a Creative Commons kind of thing where you can pull stuff off. So yeah, but there's an enormous amount of archival, which was really, to me, convincing, for me, because I knew where that came from, and I knew where it was shot, and it was in the moment, and the adult interviews were very profound too, because they had not seen a lot of their own interviews, and yet they told the same story 20 years later as if they were there.
I'm really interested in regards to the editing process. What they say, it's one thing to shoot a film, it's another thing to piece it together in the editing room. It's like that's where the film's kind of made, right? So you yourself edited the movie, and you also had Christopher Seaward and Rick Desgrace as well, all helping you with the editing. How do you three go about grabbing all of those archive footages, the interviews, and piecing it all together? Do you like to map out your stuff beforehand? Do you do visual diaries? How do you like to go about piecing a movie together like this?
We did some transcribing so we could see the words, but for me, it was more what's on screen. What is communicated on screen, the emotional value, look in the eyes, and that was a wonderful thing about this. Working with all these people, like when you looked in their eyes, you knew they were telling you the truth. There was their body language, everything about it was very raw. And which is why, like later on in the film, when I start to interview the adult kids, I go in tight. I didn't do a lot of wide shots because I wanted people to look in their eyes because they're telling the truth. The eyes say it all. When I had edited till about 2012 and got stuck, and I was like, I have to get a professional editor to help me tell this story. And that's when I got Chris Seward involved. And, he worked on Fahrenheit for Michael Moore and all these other award-winning films. He's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And he knows how to tell a story. And, kind of gave me a different perspective of what I was looking at, which was really helpful. And then him and I started working together. One of the things he's like, you're not telling the story for yourself. You're telling it for the audience. The audience, that's who you are telling this to, which is a kind of a perspective shift that a lot of filmmakers go through, hopefully, is that as much as you want to get it done and tell what you think, you're telling it to a group of people, that you don't know. Some of them you do, some of them you don't, but you're telling a story to the kids it happened to, which was a big deal for me. I wanted to let the kids know, because they didn't know all the things that happened at that point. And one of the reasons was to give them, like, here's what happened. And then also other people had been through this, and then the general public. But Christopher was amazing. Rick DeGrees was just a technical genius as far as any problems we had and up-resing footage, and so we all three of us were at different points of editing things, but Chris and I pretty much swapped chairs back and forth. I'd work on it, he'd work on it, I'd work on it, he'd work on it. And we had a lot of discussions, we had disagreement, the things that happen in an edit room. And it's also a lot of fun in the edit room. But you go through a lot of what matters to the story, what matters to what actually happened, and I really wanted to stick right with, what happened. No special effects, none of that, because didn't need it. The kids were the special effects in a way, you didn't, and special effects in a movie like this, you're never going to get it right unless you get one of these things and a couple of these creatures to come down.
Right.
Because it's just so bizarre. That's the problem. We can't replicate that.
And it also comes down to, a lot of times, the imagination is better than anything could be on screen.
Oh yeah, truth is far better than fiction by far. I mean, it's just, it's the unbelievable.
That need to make sure that the story of the children is told, no compromise, no special effects, none of that stuff. Is that what came down to having you distribute the film on your own? Did you find that when shopping the film around that some people, some companies wanted to change things, or maybe jazz some things up, and you were just like, look, I've worked on this for a long time. There are people's lives that people have put their reputations on the line to be in this film. I'm not going to compromise. And at the end, that's essentially why we're seeing yourself doing the distribution on this movie. Is that pretty much right?
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but a lot of people wanted to, when I went out shopping, wanted to change it and sort of put it more back into the UFO genre of films, which I wanted to stay away from, and make a movie like you'd make about anybody in the world that went through something normal. And even though this wasn't normal, why treat it differently? So, because we've been stuck in this UFO genre, sort of thing, which is very, how do you say it? Sensational.
Mm-hmm.
Pushing buttons, and it's like, wow, and it's making it some big thing when it's just people going through something that we don't understand completely. So yeah, that was a big fight that I had with some very large distributors, some of the biggest distributors in the world. And I would have loved to have had them on board. I really would have, because they had much more distribution capabilities and reputation. And, but at the end of the day, I thought the film, after all this work, all this time, I thought we got it right. So that was a hard decision, and I had to make it. But yeah, to self-distribute and not as lucrative for sure, but it's the right thing to do. It was the right thing to do, and that's what matters.
Again, it comes back to that theme of tenacity that I think is really prevalent throughout your story. When it comes to yourself and Ariel and the story and everything else involved with it, does this close a chapter for you, or is this just a next step in your investigations into this event? Are we going to see more content? You mentioned before there's additional interviews that didn't make the cut in the movie. I imagine there's a lot of things that didn't make the cut. Are we going to see perhaps online exclusives or DVD, or perhaps a future DVD release of more things that didn't make the final cuts of the release that a lot of people will watch very soon?
I mean, personally, I'd like to. It's definitely not the end of. This is not a closure for me at all. But what I would love to do is a director's cut with a lot of the other children's interviews in it, the people that had this on their radar scopes at different airports and installations, pilots. I mean, other witnesses that were around that area who saw a lot. I mean, I've done all those interviews. There's 70 interviews anyway. The other part that wasn't included was, how the native African population and their it was included a little bit, but that was a half-hour segment, which was absolutely fascinating. But we had to cut it just for time. But the native Africans and their experience and how they feel about these things, because they see them. They see these things more often than we do, I think, because they're outside more. It's dark, the really, really dark skies in Africa. There's not a lot of light pollution, and people generally, instead of TV, they're outside at night. So there's a lot that gets seen over there. It's a different kind of lifestyle. There's many reasons for that. But I would love to just to sort of do the, Ariel, okay, here's Ariel. This is a story that happened at Ariel. And then a second film, really kind of focusing on this is why it's even more significant because of all these other incidents that happened around it. And then, after that, I've got another movie. I've been doing a movie about a murder and a murder investigation that I did. That's pretty current, and it was basically all video and digital information that I've been figuring all this out. And I might do a film about that. And I don't know, I just have quite a lot of things I've already shot around the, other interviews of people in Africa that had nothing to do with Ariel, but had their own experiences. I mean, I hope people really understand that it's a worldwide, every single country. I've talked to people from Japan, China, you name it. Every single country on the planet has seen these things. So, well, what are we doing? What are we doing? We should be paying attention to this. I don't know why. I mean, we're getting there. That's the good part.
Well, the first step everyone needs to do is watch Ariel Phenomenon, available on all major digital providers, December 25. You can also go to arielphenomenon.com to find more information. You can rent or buy through the website as well. It really is a phenomenal film that you put together here, Randall. It's, like I said before, it's a human story about an extraterrestrial event. I think you really got to the crux about the really kind of intimate human side of these events. You really bypassed a lot of that kind of sensationalism that other filmmakers really kind of concentrate on too much, I think. And you did a great job here in presenting the stories of not only the children who were witnesses, but also the stories of John Mack and Tim Leech as well, which I think is very important. And Randall Nickerson, I thank you so much for your time today. Congratulations with the documentary. Hopefully we get to talk again in the future with your future releases, because it's been a pleasure to talk today.
Same here. I appreciate it, David. It's really nice. And it's available on Amazon right now, actually, and you can also get it on our website. But I do appreciate it, and I'll pass on the thanks to the crew and the witnesses, because they need to know, because they were a part of all of this,
Excellent.
And kudos to them,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Randall.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content. Also, if you would like to request a review and support my work, please join my Patreon via the link in the description below.